100, 200, 300, 400, 500 for Pokemon cards, 300 for clothes, and $20 for food. That sounds about right. What's up guys, Humphrey here. That was an example of what not to do. So in today's video, I'm gonna give you my top 3 tips for budgeting and basically how to create a budget. Let's get started. So when it comes to personal finance, I do feel like budgeting and tracking my spending is my biggest strength. I've been doing it since 2014, pretty much religiously. I track every single expense of the day. And whenever my friends ask me, hey Humphrey, how do I get started with budgeting? I inevitably just tell them, hey, maybe you should just track your expenses. But what I realized is that not everyone is wired that way to track their expenses every single day for the rest of their life like me. And what ends up actually happening is that a friend might have some ego get in the way, like they get a little bit too attached to what they're spending their money on, or in a way they feel shame for what they're spending money on. So in today's video, I wanted to present a couple different ways to budget where you can get comfortable with money and not really have to worry too much about, let's say, tracking your spending every single day. So for those of you guys that have a little bit more difficulty when it comes to budgeting and saving, I assume that's why you're watching this video, I do have a really simple solution for how you should think about a budget. And that's simply, if you make more than what you spend, that's basically doing a budget correctly. If there's one takeaway from this video that you can get for the rest of your life, is that a budget is just making more than you spend and basically saving that difference. So my first tip is actually broken out into 3 separate steps. And the first of those steps is to figure out how much you're spending on an average basis for the last 3 months. You can do this by consolidating all of your credit card statements and bank statements and adding them up and taking an average of the 3 months, or you can just use something a lot easier like an app like mint.com. You Need a Budget, or there's another one, truebill.com, that goes onto your phone, and basically what happens is you just connect your bank accounts or your credit cards to any of the apps and they automatically track it for you. Now, there sometimes is a downside to actually using those apps, and that is sometimes if you have too many credit cards or too many bank accounts, that it can get a little bit confused at times, and it's really hard to get a really solid financial picture, especially if you use cash or a lot of Venmo transactions. If you're a super granular type person or really type A like I am, and like I love tracking every single thing that I do, I actually write down everything in a Google Sheet. And what I'll do in this video is link that resource. I have a template for exactly that in the description below. I'll put that in the description below. I said that twice, I don't know why, but let's just keep moving on. So step 2, after you figured out your expenses for the last 3 months, on average, what you want to do is categorize those expenses into different categories. Those categories can include things like your rent, your transportation, perhaps the utilities that you got to pay every single month, subscriptions like Netflix, coffee, eating out. There's all these different types of categories, but as long as you categorize all your monthly spends, you can start to figure out where your money is going. So the third step of my first tip is to assess where your money is going based on the categories that you've written down. So I think that a lot of people kind of understand, or they inherently know where their money is going, but having it written down is kind of like in your face, and it really helps you kind of understand where your money is going. An example might be like, after I write down all of my categories, I could understand like,
oh my God, Humphrey, you've been eating out a little bit too much the past 3 months. You've been spending about $600 to $650 on eating out at restaurants.
And I inherently know like I've probably been doing that a little bit too much. So having it written down and seeing that number is going to solidify that for me. And I can be a little bit more mindful the next time I go out, whenever I'm eating out, to maybe tone it back a bit. I find that this exercise really helps if you're the type of person that might just be off by a couple $100s every month on their budget. Like, that's one of the easiest ways to kind of save $100 or $200, is to basically write down all your categories, figure out where you're overspending a little bit too much, and just put limits on those categories in which you do think that you're overspending. All right, the second tip that I have for you guys is to actually be observant when it comes to budgeting your expenses. And I'm also going to touch upon one of the money managing rules that's pretty popular on the internet right now. It's called the 50-30-20 rule, but I actually have a slight modification for that I'm going to share. When it comes to being observant, I feel like a lot of people, especially when they're spending their credit card, by the way, and it's happened to me too, you just kind of don't really understand that you're spending your money. You're swiping a card, so you're just basically making an action, and that's not really registering in your brain that you're spending money. So what I like to really do whenever I spend money is I like to write it down in my notes app or a spending tracker app that I like to use from time to time. But what you can do if you don't want to do that is at least be mindful and maybe make a mental note that, hey, you just spent some money here at this coffee shop. Maybe you should make a mental note of this so that when you're going to bed at night, you can kind of reflect on your spending for the day and realize, okay, I spent some money here and there, but that might be okay because it might still fit within my budget. So when it comes to managing your money, there is a popular budgeting kind of rule or guideline that's going on around the internet right now. And it's actually been popularized by Senator Elizabeth Warren. It's called the 50-30-20 rule because it says that you should allocate 50% of your income, your after-tax income, towards needs, 30% towards wants, and 20% towards saving. So if your after-tax income is $4,000 a month, that would be $2,000 a month would be for your needs, that's 50%. $1,200 a month would be for your wants, and $800 a month would be towards saving. Now, when it comes to your needs, you already know your categories of expenses, but your needs are basically rent, transportation, utilities, and basic groceries. So your wants are things that are optional. So things that you discretionarily spend money on. For example, getting a coffee, going out to shop, eating out, your Netflix subscription, etc. So the 50-30-20 rule is a pretty good guideline for those that are pretty new to managing their money, but I do like to shift it around a little bit based on your cost of living. So let's say your cost of living is a little bit cheaper than $2,000 a month for our $4,000 a month example. Let's say you live, I don't know, in the middle of America where it's a lot cheaper to live. If your necessities don't make up $2,000 a month, I like to shift that difference of extra spend into the saving category, not the wants category. Now, my personal modification when it comes to the 50-30-20 rule is actually to save closer to 40%. That's what I'm aiming for. It doesn't happen every single month, but if I'm able to save 40%, what I'm actually doing with those savings is I'm moving all of those savings into an investment account and actually investing that money. Now, I also want to make sure that my emergency fund is covered. So that means in case of an emergency, I have some backup money to basically survive on. I do think that's one of the things that the 50-30-20 rule doesn't really specify, which is where should your 20% of savings go? So in terms of savings, you want to have your emergency fund covered, like I said, but then the rest can just go towards your investments. And if you want some information on how to invest or how to get started with investing, I have a lot of videos on that I'll link in the description below and right up here. All right, so my third biggest tip for you guys when it comes to budgeting is to review your budget monthly and see if you're actually saving towards your goals. It's easy to get overwhelmed with a budget and think that you're not making any progress. So what I like to do every single month is to look at how far I've come in the past month. Oftentimes, and I love this quote, by the way, people overestimate what they can do in a day, but they underestimate what they can do in, let's say, a month or a year. So if you think you can solve all of your budgetary problems within, let's say, a few days, that's not really going to happen. What budgeting does require is a lot of consistency and discipline over time, but if you're able to stay consistent and disciplined, you're going to see results. So a monthly check-in is really important here. What I like to do personally is I like to look at my bank account balance from one month to the next, and I have a log of what my bank account balance is on the first of every single month. So this is a really simple way to keep track of how your budget is going. Let's say your savings goal is $800 a month, like in our 50-30-20 rule example with $4,000 of after-tax income a month. That means that your bank balance should be going up by roughly $800 from month 1 to month 2 to month 3. And let's say it actually is going up on month 1 to month 2 to month 3 on the first of every month. Well, that means on the second of every month, you can withdraw some of that money and put it into, let's say, your retirement account or your investment accounts. I think that sometimes people just make budgeting way overcomplicated, but again, guys, a summary of what budgeting is as long as you make more than you spend and you allocate some of that savings to an investment account, you're doing right by your budget. Anyways, guys, I hope that you found this content super helpful and valuable. If you did, let me know in the comments below. Make sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to my channel for more personal finance content from me in the future. It's completely free and you can always change your mind. If you like some free stocks from different brokerages, I have a bunch of those links in my description below. I believe I have links for Webull, Robinhood, and Public. Lastly, thanks to all my Patreon supporters. I appreciate you guys being here for yet another video, and I will see you guys in the next one, hopefully in a few days here. Peace.